February 1959. Deep in the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union lay one of the most remote and unforgiving wilderness areas on Earth. A vast frozen landscape stretching for hundreds of miles in every direction. Temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees at night. Blizzards that could appear without warning. A place where nature was completely in control, and human beings were completely at its mercy. It was into this frozen wilderness that 9 young Soviet university students decided to venture on a ski hiking expedition. They were experienced. They were prepared. They were excited. And not one of them would ever come home alive. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a talented and experienced hiker who had organized many successful expeditions before. His team consisted of 8 fellow students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, 7 men and 2 women, all experienced hikers and skiers in their 20s. They were the kind of young people who lived for adventure, who felt most alive when pushing themselves against the elements. Before they left, they laughed and took photographs together, full of excitement and anticipation. They had no idea that those photographs would become some of the most studied and haunting images in the history of unsolved mysteries. The group set out on January 23, 1959. Their goal was to reach the summit of Otorten Mountain, deep in the northern Ural Mountains. It was a challenging route, rated as Category 3 difficulty, the highest level of difficulty in Soviet hiking classifications. For the first several days, everything went according to plan. They made good progress through the snow. They kept detailed diaries and took photographs along the way. Then, on February 1st, bad weather forced them to make camp on the slopes of a mountain the local Mansi people called Kholat Syak. In the Mansi language, that name means Mountain of the Dead.
It would prove to be a horrifyingly accurate description. When the group failed to return as scheduled, a search party was dispatched on February 20th, 1959. What they found on the slopes of Kholat Syak made no sense whatsoever. The group's tent had been slashed open from the inside, not from outside, from inside, as if someone or something
had caused such extreme panic that the hikers had cut their way out of their own tent rather than use the entrance. The tent was still filled with all their belongings, their food, their equipment, their shoes and boots. They had fled into minus 30-degree temperatures, in their socks, in the middle of the night, without supplies, without proper clothing, in complete and utter terror. Search teams fanned out across the mountain slopes, desperately looking for survivors. The first bodies were found about a mile from the tent, near the edge of a forest. Igor Dyatlov and 2 others were found scattered across the slope between the forest and the tent. Their positions suggested they had been trying to return to the tent when they died. Over the following weeks and months, the remaining bodies were found buried under several meters of snow in a ravine. And what investigators found when they examined those bodies would baffle scientists and researchers for decades to come. The bodies told a story that nobody could explain.
Some of the hikers showed signs of having suffered extreme physical trauma. One had a fractured skull. 2 others had broken ribs. One was missing her tongue and her eyes. But here was the thing that made investigators stop cold. There were no external wounds on the bodies, no cuts, no bruises consistent with a physical attack. The injuries were internal, as if the force that caused them had come from within, or from an extreme pressure wave of some kind.
The kind of force a massive explosion might produce, or something else entirely, something that nobody could identify. Forensic investigators were completely baffled. The internal injuries suffered by some of the hikers were compared by Soviet investigators to the force of a car crash, yet there was no car, no avalanche debris consistent with that level of force.
No evidence of any physical confrontation with another person or animal. The clothing of several hikers was found to contain traces of radiation, unusual and unexplained levels of radiation, on the clothing of people who had been on a routine hiking expedition in a remote mountain range. One investigator famously wrote in his report that the hikers had died as a result of. That phrase has haunted the case ever since. Over the decades, investigators, researchers, and ordinary people around the world have proposed dozens of theories to explain what happened at Dyatlov Pass. Some believe a sudden avalanche created a pressure wave that caused the internal injuries, while leaving no external marks.
Others point to infrasound, a phenomenon where certain wind conditions create low-frequency sound waves that can cause extreme panic and hallucinations in human beings. Some investigators have pointed to secret Soviet military testing in the area that night. Witnesses reported seeing strange glowing orbs in the sky above the Ural Mountains on the night the hikers died.
And some people believe the answer is something far more extraordinary than any of these explanations. The Soviet government's handling of the investigation raised serious questions from the very beginning. The case files were classified and hidden from public view for decades. The investigation was abruptly closed just 3 months after it began, with the cause of death listed simply as an unknown natural force. The area around Dyatlov Pass was closed to hikers for 3 years after the incident, with no official explanation given. Witnesses who reported seeing strange lights in the sky on the night in question were quietly discouraged from speaking publicly. Whether the Soviet government knew more than they revealed, or whether they were simply covering their own incompetence, nobody has ever been able to say for certain. In 2019, the Russian government officially reopened the Dyatlov Pass investigation. After examining the evidence with modern technology and forensic methods, investigators announced their conclusion. An avalanche. They said a small and unusual avalanche had caused the deaths. But many investigators and researchers who had studied the case for decades rejected this conclusion entirely. The evidence simply does not fit. The radiation, the missing tongue and eyes, the internal injuries with no external wounds, the terror that caused 9 experienced hikers to flee into minus 30-degree temperatures in their socks. None of it is explained by an avalanche. Pause. And so Dyatlov Pass remains one of the most chilling and genuinely unexplained mysteries in human history. 9 young people went into those mountains full of life and excitement, and whatever happened to them up there on that frozen slope in the darkness of a February night in 1959 remains unknown, and may remain unknown forever. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustam Slobodin,
Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonishenko, Alexander Kolvatov, Nikolai Thibox-Brignoles, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Zolotaryov. Yes. 9 names, 9 lives, 9 young people who deserve to come home. If this story chilled you to the bone, make sure you subscribe, because we cover the world's greatest mysteries and darkest history every single week. The truth is out there, and this channel will never stop looking for it.